Hello everyone, welcome back again to my channel, Yam Heam TV 25. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you so much. So now let's talk about our country as an American colony. The Philippines was once a part of the United States. This happened when we were an American colony between 1898 and 1946. Minus the years of the Filipino-American War in 1899 to 1901 and the Second World War in 1942 to 1945. However, the Americans promised to leave as soon as the Filipinos showed they could run their own government. Of course, the Filipinos had no choice but to cooperate with the Americans. Fortunately, the American colonial officials kept their word and treated the Filipinos well. That is why, until today, the Filipinos who live under the Americans generally speak well of the American colonial era. The territory of the Philippines changed during the American era. As compared to the territory under the Spanish era, these were the changes. The island archipelagos of the Marianas, Carolines, and Palaos in the South Pacific no longer belong to the Philippines. Guam was made by the United States into a separate colony. The other islands in the Micronesia were grabbed by Germany and Britain. Mindanao and Sulu became part of the Philippines. To bring the Muslim Filipinos or Moros of the Sulu archipelago into American power, General John C. Batis made an agreement with the Sultan of Sulu on August 20, 1899. The Batis Treaty was not approved by the American Congress, but it helped to establish good relations between American and the Muslim Filipinos. Interior mountain regions of Luzon and Visayas were now included in the Philippine territory. They were colonized and developed during the American era. The gold mines of the Cordilleras were developed, and the Igorots joined the armed forces of the Philippines as scouts and soldiers. Baguio became the summer capital of the Philippines. The American colonial policy in the Philippines was unique in the world of colonialism. Why? The reasons for this were as follows. First, the Americans said they would go as soon as the Filipinos could stand on their own as a free nation. From the beginning, American officials did not want to hold on to the Philippines as a colony forever. They promised to train the Filipinos in democracy and self-government. They wanted the Philippines to stand on its own as a free and independent nation, and not to be a part of the United States always. Second, the Americans were kinder and more generous than other colonial powers of the same era. The Americans shared power with the Filipinos in government. The human rights of Filipinos were protected. The Americans developed the economy, improved hygiene and sanitation, and introduced popular education for all. And lastly, the Filipinos adopted American ways very well. Soon, we began to talk, eat, drink, dress, and even think like Americans. In fact, other Asians thought we acted like brown Americans. No other former colony liked its mother country as much as the Filipinos liked the United States. The American colonial government. The United States was really too far away to rule the Philippines directly. So our country was ruled by the American government in the following ways. First is military government, from August 14, 1898 to July 4, 1901. This government was run by military generals appointed by the American president. It lasted for 3 years during the Filipino-American War. There were 3 military governors. First is General Wesley Merritt. Second is General Ilwell Otis, and third is General Arthur MacArthur. General MacArthur was the father of Douglas MacArthur, the hero of the World War II. Next is the civil government, from July 4, 1901 to August 1902. This government was run by American civilian officials appointed by the American president. But later, it was run by Filipino officials elected by Filipinos. There were several kinds of civilian governments during the American era. These were the Philippine Commission, Second, the American Governor General together with the Philippine Assembly or the Philippine Legislature. And third, the Commonwealth of the Philippines. Next is the Philippine Commissions. The Philippine Commissions were composed of special American advisors to the U.S. President. There were two such commissions, but only the second one was really important. The first Philippine Commission came to the Philippines in 1899. It was led by Dr. Jacob C. Skurman, Cornell University President. Because of war, it did not stay and finish its work. The second Philippine Commission came in 1990 to 1916. It was led by Judge William Howard Taft. The Taft Commission stayed and organized the civil government in the Philippines. It shared power at first with the American military governor. Later, it shared power with the Filipinos whom it appointed as members of the Commission. The Commission passed laws for the rehabilitation of the country like the building and repair of roads and bridges. Next is the American Governor General. On July 4, 1901, the civil government was inaugurated in the Philippines. William Howard Taft became the first American Governor General. Altogether, there were 11 Governor-Generals in the Philippines, from Taft to Frank Morphy, in 1901 to 1935. The Governor-General was the chief executive in the colony. He was appointed by the American President. He was assisted by a cabinet. He made sure the laws of the colony were put into effect. Next is the Filipino participation in government. The Americans shared power with the Filipinos unlike the Spanish imperialists. True to their word, the Americans appointed Filipinos to important positions in government. This was supposed to train our people in democracy and self-rule. Because we were really ready to run our own government, the Filipino officials impressed the Americans. So more and more Filipinos began to run the colonial government. This experiment in colonial government was unique in the world. No other colonial power then, like Britain, France, Germany, or the Netherlands, allowed the local people to share power in the colonial government. The Philippines was the envy of other colonial peoples. They look up to our example in building a democracy, a free press, political parties, and making our own laws. We proved to the world that we could run our own government. At first, the Filipinos were only appointed to local governments. As the war ended, in each town or city, a Filipino was appointed to head the local government. Later, these local officials were elected in free elections. In 1901, Cayetano Arellano was appointed Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Several Filipinos were appointed members of the Philippine Commission. By 1913, there was a Filipino majority in the commission. In 1903, Gregorio became the first cabinet secretary. He was appointed Secretary of Finance and Justice. This made him the first Filipino to head an executive department. In the civil service or lower positions in government, more and more Filipinos were given permanent jobs. By 1921, 96% of civil service jobs were done by Filipinos. But the greatest participation of the Filipinos in the colonial government was in making their own laws. Next, we shall study about how these law-making bodies were created. The Philippine Bill of 1902. The American Congress had to pass laws for the Philippines at that time. Some American congressmen were not sure that the Filipinos could be trusted. They even called the Filipinos pirates, barbarians, and savages. So Congressman Henry A. Cooper stood up and recited before the House the immortal last poem of Dr. Jose Rizal. The other congressmen were deeply moved. This noble poem proved to them that the Filipinos had a beautiful culture. On July 1, 1902, the Philippine Bill of 1902 was passed by Congress. It created the Philippine Assembly. On July 30, 1907, the first free national elections were held in the Philippines for members of the All-Filipino Lawmaking Body. Nearly 100% of the registered voters cast their ballots. Hundreds of candidates campaigned under many new political parties. Finally, 80 delegates won. Most of them came from the Nacionalista Party. The Philippine Assembly was inaugurated on October 16, 1907 at the Manila Grand Opera House. Sergio Osmeña of Cebu was elected Speaker. The Philippine Assembly was the first all-Filipino lawmaking body during the American era. It helped the Philippine Commission in making laws for the colony. The Commission acted like the upper house of Congress and the Assembly acted like the lower house. Again, the national elections were held for members of the new Philippine legislature. The Nacionalista Party candidates won almost all of the seats. The new legislature was inaugurated at Manila on October 16, 1916. It had two houses, the Senate and the House of Representatives. Manuel L. Quezon of Tayabas was elected President of the Senate, and Sergio Osmeña again became Speaker of the House. Now, there was a separation of power among the three branches of government in the colony. The American Governor General was the power. He put laws into effect with the help of a cabinet. The all-Filipino Philippine legislature made the laws for the colony. The Supreme Court and lower courts decided on disputes about law. But there were still limitations. For example, the American President and Governor General could veto any laws. The American Congress regulated Philippine trade, and the American Supreme Court could overrule the Philippine Supreme Court. So, we were not entirely free yet. Our postage, currency, and coins still had the American emblems. We were not allowed to display our national flag. We had to speak, write, and study in English. Next is the Filipino Loyalty during World War I. The Filipinos appreciated the American policy in the Philippines. When the United States entered the First Filipino War in Europe 1914 to 1918, the Filipinos became their allies. The loyalty of the Filipinos to the Americans at this time was so sure. American soldiers and warships were withdrawn from Philippine bases and sent to Europe to fight the Germans. The Philippine National Militia was left in charge of the American bases here. About 25,000 Filipinos joined the U.S. Army and 6,000 Filipinos joined the U.S. Navy. The first Filipino who died under the American flag in World War I was Private Thomas Claudio. He died in the Battle of Chateau-Thierry, France on June 29, 1918. The Filipino people contributed 1 million pesos to the American Red Cross and bought 40 million in war bonds. We are helpful to the Americans because we knew that we would get our independence at last, and because we were treated well. Our colonial government under the United States teaches us the following lessons. First, the Filipinos cooperated with the Americans because we were treated well as compared to other colonial peoples. Second, during the American regime, the interior mountain regions were developed. The Sulu archipelago became part of the Philippines and Guam was made a separate colony. Third, the Filipinos were a model for other colonial peoples because we shared power with the Americans in the colonial government. We filled important positions in government, made our own laws, and had a democracy. Lastly, the Americans and the Filipinos began to work together as allies in peace and in war. The Americans were impressed with the Filipino people and their leaders. So that's all for this session. I hope that you have learned something. Thank you so much. So I'm your teacher May, leaving this quote of Ritchel Med. History is important because it teaches us about past. And by learning about the past, you come to understand the present so that you may make educated decisions about the future.
Gone.